There were 8,000 people in the concert hall, but when 14-year-old Emily started playing piano, everyone held their breath. Emily was playing Elvis's song by feeling every note with her fingertips, never having seen his face. Each touch of the keys was so emotional that even Elvis himself, who had stepped onto the stage, stopped and began to listen. In that moment, the hall fell into complete silence because everyone realized they were witnessing a performance unlike anything in history. Emily Richardson was a remarkable 14-year-old girl whose world was painted entirely in sounds, textures, and emotions. Born without sight, she had learned to navigate life through her other senses, but it was her extraordinary gift for music that truly set her apart from everyone around her. Her small hands could coax melodies from a piano that seemed to speak directly to people's hearts, creating magic that transcended the boundaries of what most people thought possible. Living in a modest home with her devoted mother, Sarah, Emily spent countless hours at their old upright piano, an instrument that had belonged to her grandmother. The keys were slightly yellowed with age, and some of the notes had a gentle warble that gave the piano its own unique character. But to Emily, it was perfect. She could feel every imperfection, every slight variation in touch and tone, and she used these qualities to create something beautiful and deeply personal. Emily's love for Elvis Presley had begun quite by accident. One afternoon, while her mother was cleaning the house, an old Elvis song had come on the radio. "Love Me Tender" filled the room with its gentle melody and heartfelt lyrics, and Emily found herself completely captivated. She sat at the piano and within minutes had picked out the melody by ear. From that moment, she was hooked on the king of rock and roll's music. What made Emily's connection to Elvis so special was that it was purely auditory and emotional. She had never seen his famous smile, his iconic hairstyle, or his flashy jumpsuits. To her, Elvis existed only in the music, in the way his voice could convey joy, sadness, love, and longing all within a single song. She would listen to his albums for hours, absorbing every nuance, every vocal inflection, and then translate these emotions into her own piano arrangements. Her mother, Sarah, often watched in amazement as Emily would close her eyes, though it made no difference to her, and lose herself completely in the music. Her fingers would dance across the keys with a confidence and passion that seemed far beyond her years. Sarah knew her daughter was special, but she also worried about Emily's future and how the world would accept a blind girl with such extraordinary talents. The opportunity that would change everything came when Sarah heard about a special charity concert being organized in their city. The event was designed to raise money for children with disabilities, and they were looking for young performers to showcase their talents. The headline act was to be a surprise guest, though rumors were circulating that it might be someone very special indeed. Sarah hesitated before mentioning the audition to Emily. She knew her daughter's talent deserved to be heard by the world, but she also understood the challenges that Emily would face, performing in front of a large audience. The girl had only ever played for family and close friends, never for strangers who might not understand or appreciate her unique approach to music. When Sarah finally told Emily about the opportunity, the girl's face lit up with an excitement that her mother hadn't seen in months. "Mom, do you think I could really do it?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Do you think people would want to hear me play Elvis's songs?" Sarah's heart swelled with pride and love as she looked at her daughter's eager expression. "Emily, darling, your music touches everyone who hears it. I think this could be exactly what you're meant to do." The audition process was nerve-wracking for both Emily and her mother. They arrived at the community center where dozens of other young performers were waiting for their chance to be selected. Emily could hear the sounds of various instruments being tuned, voices practicing scales, and the general buzz of nervous energy that filled the space. When Emily's turn came, she was led to an old piano in the center of a small room. 3 judges sat at a table nearby, their voices kind but professional as they introduced themselves. Emily couldn't see their faces, but she could sense their attention focused entirely on her as she settled onto the piano bench. "What will you be playing for us today, Emily?" one of the judges asked gently. "I'd like to play Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley," Emily replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've arranged it myself for solo piano." As Emily placed her hands on the keys, something magical happened. All the nervousness she had felt moments before seemed to melt away, replaced by the pure joy and connection she always felt when playing Elvis's music. Her fingers found the opening notes, and she began to weave a tapestry of sound that was both faithful to Elvis's original and uniquely her own. The arrangement she had created was sophisticated beyond her years, incorporating elements of jazz, classical and contemporary styles, while never losing the emotional core that made Elvis's music so powerful. She played with a sensitivity and maturity that left the judges speechless, their initial professional demeanor giving way to genuine amazement. When the last note faded away, the room remained silent for several long moments. Emily sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, wondering if she had somehow made a mistake. Finally, one of the judges cleared his throat and spoke in a voice thick with emotion. "Emily, that was absolutely extraordinary. We've never heard anything quite like it." 2 weeks later, Sarah received the phone call that would change their lives. Emily had not only been selected for the charity concert, but she had been chosen to perform as one of the featured acts. The concert would take place at the city's largest venue, with an expected audience of over 8,000 people. As the night of the concert approached, Emily found herself experiencing a mixture of excitement and terror that she had never felt before. She practiced her piece countless times, but she also spent hours simply listening to Elvis's music, trying to absorb every element that made his performances so special. The day of the concert arrived with a flurry of activity. Emily and her mother arrived at the venue early for rehearsals and sound checks. As they were led through the backstage area, Emily could hear the bustling sounds of a major production coming together. Technicians shouting instructions, instruments being moved, and the general organized chaos that preceded any large-scale performance. When Emily was finally led onto the stage for her soundcheck, the enormity of what she was about to do began to sink in. The piano had been positioned at center stage, with powerful lights shining down and thousands of empty seats stretching out into darkness that Emily could only imagine. "How does it feel, sweetheart?" the sound engineer asked as Emily settled at the piano. "Big," Emily replied with a nervous laugh. "Really, really big." But as she began to play through her piece, testing the acoustics and getting familiar with the feel of this new piano, something wonderful happened. The music seemed to fill the vast space effortlessly, and Emily could hear how her arrangement would sound to the audience that would soon fill those seats. As evening approached and the audience began to arrive, Emily waited backstage with the other performers. She could hear the growing buzz of conversation, the shuffle of feet, and the excited anticipation that filled the air. Other young performers chatted nervously around her, but Emily found herself becoming increasingly calm and focused. Her mother sat beside her, occasionally reaching over to adjust Emily's dress or smooth her hair. "How are you feeling, honey?" Sarah asked for what must have been the 10th time. "I feel ready, Mom," Emily replied, and she meant it. "I can't wait for people to hear the music." The concert began with a series of impressive performances by other young artists. Emily listened from the wings as singers, dancers, and instrumentalists took the stage, each bringing their own unique talents to the evening. The audience was warm and appreciative, responding to each act with enthusiastic applause. As Emily's turn approached, she could feel her heart rate increasing, but it was the good kind of nervous energy that she had learned to associate with making music. She thought about Elvis and how he must have felt before his own performances, channeling that same confidence and joy that made his music so memorable. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the auditorium, "please welcome 14-year-old Emily Richardson, who will be performing her own arrangement of Elvis Presley's Can't Help Falling in Love." Emily was guided onto the stage by a stagehand, her white cane tapping gently against the floor as she made her way to the piano. The audience fell silent as they watched this young girl, and many people found themselves holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. As Emily settled onto the piano bench and placed her hands on the keys, she took a moment to center herself. She thought about Elvis's voice, about the emotion he poured into this particular song, and about how she wanted to honor both the music and the man who had created it. The opening notes of her arrangement filled the concert hall with a gentle, haunting beauty that immediately captured everyone's attention. Emily had created an introduction that was entirely her own, setting up the familiar melody with delicate arpeggios and subtle harmonic progressions that built anticipation for the main theme. When the melody finally emerged, it was like hearing the song for the first time. Emily's interpretation was both reverent and revolutionary, maintaining all the tenderness and romantic longing of Elvis's original while adding layers of complexity and emotional depth that revealed new facets of the composition. Her playing was technically flawless, but more importantly, it was deeply felt. Every note seemed to come from her heart, and the audience could sense the genuine love and respect she had for the music she was performing. As she moved through the various sections of her arrangement, building to emotional peaks, and then pulling back to intimate moments, the entire auditorium seemed to breathe with her. In the wings, watching from the side of the stage, stood a figure that none of the audience could see. Elvis Presley himself had arrived at the venue as the surprise guest performer, but hearing Emily's extraordinary rendition of his song, he had decided to wait and listen before making his own entrance. Elvis stood transfixed as he listened to this young girl transform his music into something entirely new, while somehow making it even more powerful than the original. He could see that she was playing without sheet music, relying entirely on her musical instincts and emotional connection to the song. Tears began to form in his eyes as he realized he was witnessing something truly special. As Emily reached the climactic section of her arrangement, her playing became even more passionate and expressive. She had crafted this moment to be the emotional heart of the piece, where all the tenderness and longing of the original lyrics would be conveyed purely through the piano. Her hands moved across the keys with increasing intensity, but never losing the delicate touch that made every note sing. The audience was completely silent, mesmerized by what they were hearing. Many people found themselves wiping away tears, moved by the pure emotion that Emily was channeling through her music. Parents held their children closer, couples reached for each other's hands, and strangers found themselves sharing meaningful glances as they experienced this magical moment together. In the final section of her arrangement, Emily brought the intensity down to barely above a whisper, creating an intimate conclusion that felt like a gentle embrace. The last few measures were played with such tenderness and care that every person in the audience felt as though Emily was performing just for them. When the final note faded away, the silence in the auditorium stretched for what felt like an eternity. Emily sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, unsure of what kind of response to expect. She had poured everything she had into this performance, and now she could only wait to see how it would be received. Suddenly, from somewhere in the darkness beyond the stage lights, came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. It was just one person at first, but the steady rhythm of the applause seemed to wake the entire audience from their trance. Within seconds, the single clap had grown into thunderous applause that filled every corner of the massive venue. People began to rise from their seats, and soon the entire audience was on their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Emily could hear the appreciation and emotion in their applause, and she felt a wave of joy and gratitude wash over her unlike anything she had ever experienced. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As the applause continued, Emily heard footsteps approaching from behind her on the stage. She turned in her seat, confused about who might be joining her, when she heard a voice that she recognized instantly. "That was absolutely beautiful, darling," Elvis said as he walked up behind the piano. "I've never heard my song played with such heart and soul." Emily's mouth fell open in shock. She couldn't believe that Elvis Presley himself was standing just a few feet away from her, speaking directly to her about her performance of his music. The audience, seeing Elvis appear on stage, erupted into an even louder roar of approval. Elvis walked around to where Emily was sitting and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Would you mind if I joined you for the next verse?" he asked with his characteristic charm and warmth. As Elvis played his guitar and sang for Ben, something magical happened in that hospital room. The clinical sterility of the medical environment seemed to fade away, replaced by warmth, love, and the healing power of music. Ben, who had barely spoken above a whisper in weeks, found strength in his voice as he sang along with his hero. Tommy sat beside his brother, watching in amazement as Ben's face brightened in a way it hadn't since before his illness began. For these precious moments, Ben wasn't a sick child in a hospital bed. He was just a little boy enjoying music with his family and his favorite singer. Elvis had brought more than just his guitar. He had brought a small collection of his records, signed specifically for Ben, and a scarf that he had worn during many performances. But the most precious gift he gave was his presence, his genuine care, and his willingness to use his fame for something truly meaningful. "Ben," Elvis said as their time together was drawing to a close, "I want you to know that you're one of the bravest kids I've ever met. And Tommy here is one of the best big brothers in the world. You two are lucky to have each other." Ben nodded weakly, but his smile was radiant. "Thank you for coming, Elvis. I love you. I love you too, Ben. And I want you to remember something. Whenever you hear my music, I'll be right there with you, okay?" Elvis's visit to Ben Williams created ripples that extended far beyond that single hospital room. Word of the visit spread quickly, first through the hospital staff, then to local media, and eventually to national news outlets. But unlike many celebrity hospital visits that might seem like publicity stunts, this felt different. The genuine emotion, the spontaneous nature of the promise made during the concert, and the obvious impact on the family made this story resonate with people across the country. Letters began pouring into Elvis's management company from families with sick children, each hoping for a similar miracle. While Elvis couldn't visit every child, the attention brought much-needed awareness to children's hospitals and the challenges faced by families dealing with serious childhood illnesses. The story also had a profound impact on Tommy's parents. Sarah Williams had been struggling with feelings of helplessness and despair as she watched her youngest son's condition deteriorate. But seeing Elvis take the time to care for Ben, seeing the joy it brought to her child, reminded her that even in the darkest times, there could still be moments of light and hope. Michael Williams was moved by the example Elvis had set. Here was one of the most famous people in the world, who could have easily dismissed a child's request or handled it through intermediaries. Instead, he had made a personal commitment and followed through on it completely. The visit from Elvis gave Ben a burst of energy and joy that lasted for several days. He talked constantly about Elvis's visit, asking Tommy to replay every detail over and over again. He listened to Elvis's records constantly, singing along in his weak but determined voice. More importantly, Ben seemed to find a sense of peace about his situation. While he was too young to fully understand the concept of death, he somehow sensed that his time was limited. But instead of being afraid, he talked about how Elvis had promised to be with him whenever he heard the music. Tommy spent every possible moment with his brother during those final days. They would listen to Elvis records together, and Tommy would tell Ben stories about the concert, about how brave Ben was, about how much everyone loved him. 3 days after Elvis's visit, Ben took a turn for the worse. The family gathered around his bedside, and as Ben's breathing became more labored, Tommy softly sang "Love Me Tender," the same song Elvis had sung just days before. Ben Williams passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family, with Elvis's music playing softly in the background. He was 4 years old. Ben's funeral was a testament to the impact that one small child could have on a community. The church was packed not only with family and friends, but also with hospital staff who had cared for Ben, with people who had heard about Elvis's visit and been moved by the story, and with other families who were fighting similar battles with childhood illness. Elvis sent a beautiful arrangement of flowers with a note that read, "For Ben Williams, who taught me that the greatest courage comes in the smallest packages. Love, Elvis Presley." Tommy, dressed in his best suit, stood next to his parents as they said goodbye to his little brother. He had aged years in the past few months, forced to confront realities that most adults struggle to understand. But he had also learned about love, about courage, and about the power of reaching out to others in times of need. Years later, when people talked about that magical evening, they would remember not just the technical brilliance of Emily's performance, but the way her music had made them feel. In a world that often seemed divided and harsh,
She had created a moment of pure beauty and connection that reminded everyone present of their shared humanity. Emily Richardson had walked onto that stage as a talented but unknown 14-year-old girl. She had walked off as an inspiration to millions, having proven that the power of music to touch hearts and change lives was as strong as ever. And in doing so, she had honored not only Elvis's musical legacy, but the belief that art, at its highest level, has the power to make the world a more beautiful and compassionate place. The evening had shown everyone that sometimes the most powerful performances come not from perfect technique or flashy showmanship, but from a pure heart and an authentic connection to the music itself. Emily's gift was not just her ability to play the piano beautifully, but her capacity to channel genuine emotion through her music in a way that touched the souls of everyone who heard her play.